right, welcome. Welcome. um, Thanks for joining us again today. We are excited and kind of nervous about this one because it's really personal. We both been through a lot of struggles with this one. And today we are going to be talking about the super emotional journey of losing your financial independence. And a little bit that goes along with that is like losing who you were before kids too. Shit, I didn't plug it in.
Hello? Oh, there we go. I feel like it's a little bit of an identity crisis. You go through a big adjustment period and who you were before you had kids, who you were when you were working to not working. It just ebbs and flows, shifts. I
Life's
don't
all
know.
about that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Does not make it easy. Um, yeah, so we're kind of going to go into that and discuss the journey here. Um, so I, hold on. All right. So about me, I have worked since I was like 11 years old. At 11 years old, I started babysitting for a few kids in town. There was one family that I would babysit overnight all the time at 11 years old. And I look at my son, I'm like, he's 14 and I don't trust him for 15 minutes with my kids. Like, I can't imagine leaving him overnight. Um, and so that's kind of how my work history started. I was a babysitter, then I was a dishwasher as soon as I could get a real job. Then I worked at a pizza shop, became a pizza manager.
I feel like this just shows your work ethic, though. Seriously, from a very young age.
I after that I went to a children's hospital and worked there. Then I starting my own businesses. I had a house cleaning business. I had a kids clothing design line. I used to sew straps for a fire truck manufacturer in our town. And so like all the straps that would hold like the tools in place on the truck, and
Oh, that's so cool.
I sewed all those for them. I and then my dad and I decided to start a business where we built grooming equipment. It started in his garage. We started with one piece of steel. We made one grooming tub, and then his brother sold equipment, and it kind of just took off from there. And he started selling it, and and then we'll get into family business, but it's really hard to work with family. So what about you? What's your work history like?
Oh man. I mean, I guess I did the whole babysitting thing up through high school. And then probably my junior year it started getting more into waitressing um and then my senior year I had two jobs. I waitressed and then I did like some clerical filing work. But I always worked with kids in some capacity. I know in high school we had like the little daycare there, for church, babysitting. That was always something my go-to.
Mm-hmm.
And then crazy turn of events. I did the whole college thing and continued to work through my college days, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. Isn't that everyone?
That's why I never went to college.
Yes,
because
yeah.
I've still never figured out what I want to do.
I feel like I was all over the place. I did the cosmetology route. I have my cosmetology degree or cosmetology license. Um, and I did that for a while, but I ended up going back to school for education, which is funny. And I worked at a preschool at the time. It was like a charter school down in Florida, and I loved it. Um, and then getting my bachelor's, worked through there, and then ended up working in middle school. And since I had my first, I haven't worked in 5 years until this year,
Yeah,
which
that's
is crazy.
crazy.
It is crazy. It's still kind of an adjustment. But yeah, so now I'm just homeschooling, home full time, and then I work part time at a daycare that my kids get to come and attend. So I'm still with my kiddos, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
Um,
nice to get out of the house and just see different people and talk to different people and
Honestly, it's good for the kids. It's out of my comfort zone, but I know how much it's good to get out of the house. It's good for the kids to have different interactions with other adults and other kiddos throughout the day. So it was just good.
yeah. And transferring from a career to staying at home, I thought I was alone in that. I thought my feelings of not knowing what to do with myself, like I thought I was crazy because everybody's like, "Well, you get to be home with your kids. You're so lucky." Like, you know how many women would love to do that, and it's like, so I just kind of sat there and sucked it up and
Honestly, the word that comes to mind when you're talking, it's how I felt, was so isolated. And I'm a
yes.
homebody by nature. I could be home all week and not leave the house. But it is very isolating, and you do have that. I even said like strained friendships
Mm.
because they're still in the workforce, and now you're home, and it's such an easy job. You're home with your kids all day. Like it can't be that hard.
It's hard to relate or talk about things where think you can relate because they're in a different
They're just in a different
season. I don't know. They're in a different,
place.
yeah, place. Yeah.
It's
Like
like comparing apples and oranges.
I'm in my 40s. So when I left high school, my best friend had two babies back to back at 18 and 19. And she and in my 20s, I partied and worked. That was my
Yeah.
life. And she was raising babies. And
Yeah.
now her babies are graduated and out of the house and I still have babies at home.
Right.
It's like we grew apart because we were in completely different places most of our adult
I
life.
firmly think that God puts people in your life during different seasons, but that doesn't mean that it's their lifelong. I know that sounds so
Right.
harsh, but I like there's pivotal people I can think of in my mind that were in my life from like 17 to 20 and then from like 20 to 25. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And they were
Hmm.
like the maid of honor at my wedding. I think we talked twice a year. And I love her. I love her, but we're in different places, we're in different seasons, it's just sometimes you feel isolated. You have less to relate to in people that were really important in your life at that time. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yep. I get that. I'm there and I'm sure we're not alone. I'm sure there's lots of moms out there who feel that same way.
Right. So then I was thinking about if you're feeling isolated, something to get you out of that. Something that helped me was just the independent goals outside of the home.
Right.
So, like I was saying, it's out of our comfort zone to go to these places 2 days a week or whatever for the kids, but I needed some kind of goal outside of home
I did too.
just to not feel so isolated. As that,
Yeah. Well, and for me, I had worked for so long and I felt like my personality was tied to my work, like what I was
mm-hmm.
doing, how hard I was working.
Right.
And so when I left and my husband's like, just focus on the kids, worry about that. We decided to homeschool. I couldn't. I couldn't do it, even though he was begging me to. So when we lived in Florida, I picked up a job delivering groceries at night. I just couldn't sit at home. I couldn't stand the thought of not making money. It drove me crazy. I hated doing it, but I loved doing it because it kind of gave me like a sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then when we moved to Tennessee, I just told myself, I'm like, look, this is where I'm at in life. It's time for me to quit this, put this on the back burner. Not that I'm done working or not that I'm done figuring things out, but like put this on the back burner and focus on the day to day of raising your children.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I feel like question I kept asking is, am I enough? Like you said, you had to go out of the house and get a job, even in the evenings. I always feel like I'm not enough in the monotony of like the day to day task of taking care of the kids. There's no monetary value of taking care of the kids. I constantly catch myself going back and I'm like, okay, well, if I had to hire somebody right now to watch my 3 children all day long, how much money would I have to pay them? I know that changes depending on where you live, but how much would I have to pay them?
It's ridiculously expensive.
Childcare is so expensive. It's so incredibly expensive. Like, just to go on a date to have someone come watch 3 kids, if you have to pay for that, that's
It's like $60.
right. Well,
Yeah.
where we're at. But yeah.
And then on top of that, you got to pay for your meal. And so like just to
exactly.
do a date night, you're looking at $150, $200 when it should just be a quick thing.
Right.
And that a lot of that comes with moving away from family. Like I moved away
I
from
guess that's
family,
true.
and so I don't. Not that we really leaned on our family much when we lived in South Dakota, but if we needed them in emergency, like
Your village got a little smaller.
Yes, yeah. Like we had to go to the emergency room several times, and I always would call family and be like, "Can you
Right.
help us out, please?" I wouldn't have that here. My husband went to the emergency room in Florida,
Oh, I got you.
and
You bring your babies over to
but
my
in
house.
Florida, it was like I was alone, and my husband just went to get checked out, and they ended up keeping him for 6 days, and so it was like, well, he needs his laptop for he wants to work while he's there. He needs a
Mhm.
phone charger. Like it was during COVID. I couldn't bring my kids in the hospital. I'm like, how do I even get these things to him? I'm alone.
Oh my goodness.
So Leo was 12, and when I put the kids to bed one night, and then I ran up to the hospital after the kids were in bed. But it's hard to figure that kind of stuff out when
No,
you're
you were
on your own.
babysitting at 11. 12's good.
Yeah. I figured if they were asleep and the hospital's only a few blocks away, if there was a real emergency, call 911.
He was capable of that for sure.
Yeah, but what really like changed things for me was in 2020. I know you quit when you had a kid, so
Mhm.
that's kind of where it went for you.
Yeah, but I feel like that already, when you have a baby, your identity already kind of changes. Like
Oh, for sure.
that's a huge adjustment from going from no babies to one. I feel like that's just hard in general because you're
You
learning
have to
to
change
put
who you are.
yeah, you're learning to put yourself not first or your spouse not first in that little bit of moment, or a little bit of time. But you also lose your job, or not your job, but your identity that you had with your job
Right.
and becoming a parent all right at the same time.
Well, and even working a job, it doesn't really matter where you work.
Mhm.
You're talking to people. You're talking to
Mhm.
adults all day long. Like even if they aren't your best friends, you have someone to speak with,
Mhm.
and you go to being at home by yourself. And the only person you have to speak with is your spouse, and hopefully they aren't like burnt out at the end of the day. Because then you don't have much.
I had a joke, or not a joke. I had finally got out of my shell and we went and met with a mom's group. And I remember having like the first conversation with an actual adult human, not a 3 or 4-year-old human, an adult human. And I could not even figure out the words to say in the conversation. I feel like I'm talking to a 3-year-old.
Right.
Like even my ability to put sentences together was hindered.
Mm-hmm.
No, seriously, it was so awkward for me. I was so uncomfortable.
So was I. I called myself socially awkward for so long. I still kind of think I am socially awkward, but maybe I'm just an awkward human. I don't know.
No, that's everybody.
And that's something I've realized more too.
Pause. Oh, sweet boy. You were saying awkward. I'm still. We're kind of like right in here.
uh, yeah. So I felt super awkward, but I do see a lot of people feel that way. But
I think that's a consistent thing, actually. Maybe people just don't talk about it, or they're better at covering
oh,
it up. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
I
I'm
thought I
awkward.
was the crazy one. I thought I was socially awkward, and I thought I was just weird, a weird kind of human. And then I started meeting more people, and everybody's like, "I'm just socially awkward," or I just not very social." I'm like,
Or you grew up thinking
not
like this
me.
was me. I thought I was more extroverted. I don't think I am. I think I'm actually more of an introverted person. I think that I enjoy being in social situations, but that's not where like I fill my cup.
Right.
I
Yeah.
fill my cup in more small settings, more
That's weird. I
intimate
felt the same
settings.
way too. Growing up, I thought I was really super outgoing, and then the older I got, I'm like,
Maybe that's just because we saw more of the world.
yeah, maybe.
I don't know. But yeah, no, I think everyone kind of feels that way. And then maybe just as time changes and your identity shifts with motherhood, you kind of, yeah, I guess your circle gets a little smaller.
For sure. Yeah. Things really change.
Yep.
Um, so for me, like when 2020 came around, being in a family business is really hard. I don't know if any of you are in there, but my sister, my dad, and I all worked together, and it got to the point where we needed a break. And so I looked at my husband. I'm like I gotta step away from the business. I just for my mental health, I just can't do this anymore. And he thought I was crazy at first, but he understood because he watched me come home frustrated and every day. And
At that point, you were, I mean, I guess the breadwinner, right?
yeah, we about made the
Made
same.
equal. Okay.
Yeah. So it's hard to walk away from half your salary.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're taking half
I
your
was
household
making a little bit
income.
more than him, but I mean, really, it half
That's a
of
significant,
it. Yeah.
a significant loss.
And um, he he was like, I get it. I know you need to do this for your sanity, so let's figure out what we need to do. And I said, honestly, I don't really want to just quit. Like, I want to try something new. I grew up in South Dakota my whole life. I want to just do something different. And he goes, what are you thinking?
You got the adventure itch.
And oh man, it's
So you just move across the whole country.
I didn't realize that that's who I was. I didn't know that I was such a gypsy soul before this, but once we moved, I'm like, I just want to see it all. I want to see everything. But I looked at him. I'm like, it's the middle of COVID. You're working from home. We can go anywhere. Where do we want to go? And he's like, I'm like, well, we vacation in Florida every year. Let's do it. And then the conversation came with telling our family that I was leaving the business and leaving the state, and they all thought we were absolutely nuts. They thought we were so crazy because we had just bought our like dream house, and then so we picked up and moved to Florida, and it was really hard to leave all of our family behind, and even though we didn't lean on them much, but it's hard to start all over again with nobody.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's helped us become a more connected family unit. We've become tighter because we have to lean on each other more.
And one of the conversations I've had with my dad recently is through struggling, I feel like you have the most growth in your life. So like changing your whole environment, everything about that, struggling with family stuff, job stuff, everything. That's where God uses you to do most of your growth. I feel like
yeah,
you're
changing,
uncomfortable.
yep.
That's growth happening. So if you're feeling isolated or you're moving across the country and you're all by yourself, or I'm getting off topic, but either way, I feel like you had a lot of growth in that season. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about your marriage, your family unit.
I guess I didn't really know who I was before, which is weird because it was 38 years of my life. But I had just been head down, grind, focus, move forward for so long that I didn't even stop to think of like, who am I? What do I like? Well, what do I want to do with myself? And so doing that kind of reset who I am and what I'm doing with my life. And I don't know. Luckily, though, at the same time, my husband got a promotion. So almost about the same time, my husband got a promotion, and so we could have afforded to kind of pick up and start all over again.
So when we lived in Florida, we bought our first house. I was teaching, so I was on a salary, and Justin was working full time, and we were probably about equal too. And we had just closed on our house, and I want to say like 3 months later had our son, and I stopped working. So we had bought this house and expecting to have two payments going to it too, for the time
Mm-hmm.
being. I didn't know if I was going to go on maternity leave at the time, and I ended up not going back. But that financially was huge. So I can only imagine if you guys went from two incomes that are, I mean, you cut it in half. So,
Yeah, we had a much bigger house, two fancy cars. Like
so when you
we cut
moved to
out all the
Florida, did you
fluff.
guys downsize? I guess.
Yeah, we went from a 2,900 square foot house to a 1,700 square foot house, which was a huge adjustment for us because we were used to all having our own space,
Space. Mm-hmm.
and then going to this little tiny area where the
Mm-hmm.
biggest space we had was the living room, and we had to be with each other.
Right.
Was a little different, but luckily we had a pool, so we were able to get
And you're in
outside and
Florida,
do
so you can
different things.
go outside.
Yeah, go to the
You can go
beach.
outside. There's no winter season really there. Yeah, I mean
Although
we've
I do have to say, moving to Florida, I don't know, I loved Florida, but we didn't have snakes and big, huge spiders like that in South Dakota.
oh yeah, the
So
bugs, mosquitoes.
I was a little worried to let my kids go outside and have a mosquito carry them off or something. So
Yeah, they're
we
huge.
didn't spend much time outside unless we were at the beach.
Yeah.
We had a big lotted area next to our house, and so we saw a lot of snakes, and that didn't
Yeah, no, and
that
they're
didn't go
venomous
well for
snakes
me.
down there. They're not just like little garter snakes. There's like water moccasins and
Yeah.
alligators coming in your pool.
Yeah.
Did you ever have that happen?
No,
Oh
ours
no.
was fenced in. Ours was, we had a screen around ours,
No.
thankfully.
I know. Yeah. When we ended up moving to Tennessee, I guess we kind of did downsize from our Florida home. But we've had seasons where we repeatedly have only had one vehicle. Like our family has only had one car. Justin's working from home since COVID really happened. So we just have one vehicle. But there's a lot of like financial changes when you go from having income to no income and staying home.
Right. So how else did you do that besides cutting out a car?
I mean, I know we do strict meal planning. I mean, we budget everything. I'm super frugal. I'm super frugal.
I wish I were that. I wish
No.
I've tried budgeting, and then I write everything down. I've got this great plan, and then I never look at it again.
I almost feel like I'm crazy when it comes to money because I just don't want to spend it. I mean, I just am so. I'm just frugal. I'd rather save it or go. I'm like an experienced person. If I'm gonna spend the money, I want to go take a trip and
Do
do
something.
something. I want to
Yeah.
take our kids and go do things. I'm not gonna. I don't want to buy something that's just gonna sit or they're gonna be interested in it for a minute and forget about it when they're older. But I
Yeah,
feel like
there was
experiences
a
last.
shift for me when I moved too. A shift
Yeah.
for me where I went from buying, like, I had a huge craft
Things.
closet full of things, and then when we moved to Florida, it was like, no, we want to go on a boat trip, and we
Yeah.
want to, so
Well, in
there's
that
a
craft closet was teaching your
change.
kids, but so
Yeah.
is taking them on a boat trip.
Yeah.
So it's just like a shift in how you teach, where your money is prioritized and all of that, I guess. But yeah, no, we do a lot of meal planning and budgeting, and I write a lot of stuff down. Justin's kind of the financial guru. He has like the apps that you can plug in all your
Mm.
income, and it generates where you should be spending your money.
I have those too. I just kind of ignore them. I wish I were better about that. So we'll have to do a budgeting podcast, and you can teach me lots of things.
Oh man.
um, I mean, I'd like to transition into talking about the identity shift, and then rediscovering yourself, who you are, how you took care of yourself. Kind of give some advice for what to do when you're feeling like that.
And finding new purpose. So when you're in this position, you have resources to reach out, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Finding somewhere to go.
Yeah.
Like, I felt very alone in Florida, and then I moved to Tennessee, and randomly, I mean, how many of you know your neighbors? Probably not many. I've never found a better friend than I found in
Oh.
my neighbor. So, I mean, you find them in the most unexpected places. You know, you can find support anywhere. But I really want to dig more into that, and
But there are resources. There's resources to dig into that,
for
like
sure,
Facebook groups and stuff like that. So we can talk a
yeah.
lot more about that.
But our time is up for today.
Yep.
So unfortunately, all those things we just listed are things we'll be discussing on our next podcast. Um, uh, we really could have done a 2 hour on this, but we're
Yeah.
going to try and narrow it down to our 1 hour time slot. But we hope that you'll join us next week for the second half of this discussion. It's going to be a good one, and we
In the
want to share our
meantime,
communities and stuff.
we got to check out our website.
Yes.
We're going to have some blog posts coming out, hopefully, right?
Yes. And you can, on our website, you can find everything about us, our TikTok page, our Instagrams, our Facebook. We have a More Than Motherhood community page on Facebook. It's a good way to get plugged in with other moms who are kind of struggling and going
How
through the
cool
same
would it be if
thing.
people commented where they're located so they can kind of reach out and find
Someone
like-minded
close to
moms?
them.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Share it with your friends. We're trying to really get it growing right now so that we can have a really good community, and we think it would be fun someday to do a really big mom meetup somewhere.
Oh,
so.
yeah, that would be cool.
But we hope you'll join us next week for the second half of this podcast, and thank you for joining in this week. We'll see you again.
Bye. Give it a break, and then we can keep going.
Yeah.
Where are we starting at? Why was I old? I feel like I'm so scattered.
You want to talk about the initial
No.